everyone. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about the graph of cosine. So first, I'd like to discuss positive cosine. So if you remember from Algebra 2, a positive cosine graph starts up at the maximum value and kind of looks like a U. It goes down and then back up again. So our points of reference are going to be these 5 points right here. This is our positive cosine graph that starts at the maximum value. That's very important to know that, okay? And if you wanted to label this, this would be y equals just regular cosine of x. Okay, so if we were to graph a negative cosine graph, we're going to start our value at the midline, and it kind of creates an N-looking shape with these key points here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this graph always starts at the minimum value. So these are the two graphs where if you were to unwind the unit circle, you would actually get this graph, and this one is a reflection over the x-axis of the first one. So these are the two graphs of interest that we're going to discuss. Okay, so let's try an example together. So we'll call this example number 1, and I want to graph y equals 3 cos x over the interval from 0 to 2 pi. So take a minute, find your a, your c, your p, and your I values, and hit resume when you're ready for the answers. Okay, so a is the absolute value of the number in front, so a should have been 3. C is your b value, or your number of cycles, which is in front of the x, which is 1. Period is 2 pi over b, where b is the number of cycles, so 2 pi over 1 is 2 pi. Interval is period over 4, so period is 2 pi over 4 reduces to pi over 2. All right, so now I want to graph this. So I know that it's a positive cosine graph, so I want to make sure I have this graph in the back of my head, that I start at the maximum and I make a U shape with these 5 key points. So if we're going to graph this, first let's set up our amplitude. So my amplitude is 3, so 3 and negative 3. This one you can actually make exact, so it really doesn't matter too much though. And then I want to set up my interval as counting by pi over 2. So that's counting by 1/2. So we're going to say 1/2 pi, 2 halves pi, 3 halves pi, 4 halves pi. And let's pause, because 4 divided by 2 is 2, or 2 pi, so that's why I need to stop there. All right, so my cosine graph starts up at my maximum, so my first value is going to be up at 3. My next value goes down at my midline, so this value goes to my midline. Then after that, I go down to the minimum value, so I'm going to go down to 3. Then I go back up to the midline, and then back up to the max. So the next tick mark, I go to the midline, and the next tick mark, I go to the max. So if I connect this, again, try to make it curvy. That is your cosine graph. So let's test it out, make sure everything works out. Is our amplitude 3? From the midline to the max, is that 3? Yep. From the midline to the min, is this distance 3? Yes. Cycles, do I see one of these, one rotation from 0 to 2 pi? Yes, I do. Period is how long it would take to complete one cycle. Well, this is one cycle, or one rotation. It took 2 pi, so we're good. All right, and the last thing I could ask you to do is tell me the range. And in this particular example, my range goes from -3 to 3. -3 being my lowest and 3 being my highest. All right, let's try another one. Okay, so example 2. We have y equals -5 cos 3x. Again, over the interval from 0 to 2 pi. So take a minute, pause the video, and See if you can find the A, the C, the P, and the I. And if you even want to try to graph it, that's fine too. But then hit resume when you're ready for the explanation. So the amplitude is the absolute value of -5, which is 5. The cycles is the number in front of the x, which is 3. The period is found by taking 2 pi and dividing it by b, where b is the number of cycles. So 2 pi over 3 is my period. My interval is period over 4. And my period is 2 pi over 3. And we need to divide that by 4. So in this case, we need to remember to keep, change, flip. Keep the 2 pi over 3. Change the division to a multiplication and flip the 4 over 1 to 1/4. And then we multiply straight across. So we get 2 pi straight across 12, which reduces to pi over 6. So in this particular problem, we're counting by sixths. And it's a negative cosine graph. So we want to keep the negative cosine graph picture in our heads with these 5 important tick marks. All right, so let's set up our axis. So it looks like my amplitude is 5, so I'm going to count up 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm counting my interval by sixths. So 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6. So let's do that. So we have 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, 6/6. Now, I didn't write the other ones in just because I'm squished here for space, so please do so on your paper. But 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, 6/6. This is only 1. 6 divided by 6 is 1. We have to go to 2 pi. So you're going to keep going. So 7/6, 8/6, 9/6, 10/6, 11/6, 12/6. 12/6 is equivalent to 2 pi. So I know that that's how far I need to go because I need to get to that 2 pi. So again, please make sure you are writing down all of the tick marks. I don't have enough space. I'm going to squish it. So when we graph our picture, we need to make sure that we start at our minimum because it's a negative cosine graph. So we're going to start down here and we're going to go our 5 tick marks. So after the minimum, we go to our midline, then max. So the next tick mark, we go to the midline. The next tick mark, we go to the max. So minimum, midline, max, and then midline, minimum. So this next tick mark is going to be the minimum and then midline. And then you just follow the pattern. So the next one's going to be the midline, maximum, midline, minimum, midline, maximum, midline, minimum. And you just connect. Now it's not pretty, but it does exactly what I need it to do. We see here that our cycles are 3. I see 3 of these between 0 and 2 pi. So let's trace it out to show you. So we've got 1, 2, 3. 3 cycles between 0 and 2 pi. Period is 2 pi over 3. How long it takes to make 1 cycle. So look, 1 cycle ends right here. So let's fill in those numbers just to prove to you that it works. So 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, and 4/6. So you can tell that 4/6 is the end of this 1 cycle. So if I took 4/6 and I reduced it, wouldn't I get 2 over 3 pi, which is my period? And that's it. This one's a little harder. Yeah, it's definitely harder because I have to count by sixths, so therefore I really have 12 tick marks here. But if you have a big piece of paper, it's not too bad. All right, let's try one last example. All right, so we'll call example number 3, y equals 2 cos 1/8 x. And let's just say we'll go over the interval from 0 to 8 pi. Now I know you're used to me going to 2 pi, but you'll see why I changed it in just a second. So let's find our a, our c, our p, and our I. So if you'd like to try this one on your own, go ahead. Otherwise, here's the explanation. So the amplitude is the number in front of the front of the cos, which is 2. Cycles is the number in front of the x, which is 1/8. Period is 2 pi over b, where b is the number of cycles. So 2 pi over 1/8. Again, we have to keep, change, flip the 8 over 1, and we get 16 pi. And our interval is period over 4. Period is 16 pi divided by 4 is 4 pi. Okay, so if we're setting up our graph here, we know that our amplitude is 2, so we want to go up 2 and down 2. So 2 and -2. And we know that this is a positive cosine graph because the 2 is positive. So again, we want to keep this picture in our heads as the idea behind this. And we're going to set up our interval to be 4 pi. So we're going to count by 4 pi's. So we've got 4 pi and then 8 pi would be the next interval. So that's why I had to change my interval to be 8 pi, because otherwise 2 pi was too small. You wouldn't be able to graph anything. So we're starting our graph at our maximum, and then we're going down to our midline, and then back down to our minimum. So we start up at the maximum, go to the midline, down to the minimum. But we're going to notice that this is all we're graphing, because I only wanted to graph from 0 to 8 pi. If I wanted to continue this graph, I would have had to ask you to go to about 16 pi if I wanted to see one full cycle. So amplitude is 2, distance from the midline to the max, distance from the midline to the min is 2. I only see 1/8 of the cycle from 0 to 2 pi. So if you think about it, the 2 pi would be really only here. You know, it's hard to see that one. So 1/8 of the cycle would be from here to here. That's 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, which is a half, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8, if you break it up into 8 different pieces. And then interval is what we counted by. Again, I could ask you about the range about these questions. Range is the lowest to the highest. So the lowest value is -2, and my highest value is +2. All right, that's probably the hardest type of problem that you'll see, but that's it for today, and let us know if you have any questions. Have a good one.